Now we're talking about scheduling time. Ooh, riveting, right? No one would have been here if we didn't have chicken tenders. Because nobody cares about like scheduling your time, right? Especially during the summer. Like how many, let's go for like a room record of who sleeps in the most on average during the summer. Like raise your hand if you think you got like a ridiculously late wake up time. What's your wake up time?
Either like 1:30 to 2:30.
That's crazy.
In the afternoon. Anyone worse than 1 or 2? She just won immediately. Goodness great. For real?
Or after sleep apnea. Because before I would sleep until like 4 p.m. And then
Jeez.
I'd run like 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. and then sleep that cycle.
Wow.
That
Wait, you'd sleep for 12 hours too?
Yeah, and I'd still feel nothing. That's the thing about sleep apnea, bro.
Well, hope you get some meds, man.
We're good.
So the reason we're talking about this during, honestly, like this is the time where you probably have the most free time. Unless if you have a job, unless if you have like 19 summer classes or whatever. This is probably your chillest part of your year, right? For the most part. Anyone not like, is this summer like really stressful for anybody? Okay, so there's a few. Oh, what do you guys do? Goodness gracious. So the reason we're talking about like scheduling your time and like really taking ownership of your time is because I kind of think about it like if I were to give you this kind of like talk in like November, it's about as helpful as like teaching like a drowning person at sea how to swim, right? Because like in November, like you're already dying. And so you teach someone to swim, not when they're drowning, but when they got the time to be able to learn how to swim, right? There's some lessons that can't really be remedies once the emergency's happening, once everything's falling apart. So here's how I want you guys to view it. You may think it doesn't really apply that much right now because, you're not that stressed, life's okay right now. But if you get this stuff now, I promise you it's going to be super helpful, and it could actually be the make or break in this next coming school year, this next semester. You applying this stuff tonight could be the make or break between you just utterly suffering and dying or thriving in that season. So I encourage you, I try to give everybody like a sheet of paper. I don't want you to, you can take notes on it if you want. I would encourage you not, because it's actually going to be a practical exercise in a minute. But I would highly encourage, if you have like a journal, definitely use that to take notes, or just use your phone. I just really want to trust you guys, and I want to challenge you to actually take notes, because you're going to forget a lot of this stuff, but I think there's a lot of helpful principles. By the way, nothing I'm going to say tonight is like deep or like mind-bending or hard to understand. It's just going to be like shoot you straight kind of stuff, okay? But hopefully some of it can be like really helpful nuggets of wisdom so that in November, like you're actually a healthy, okay person and you're not dying, right? Because like we almost live in this inevitable cycle of like you're going to die every single time the end of the semester comes around. Like maybe we don't have to live that way. So that's why we want to talk about this. So the anchor verse, if you have your Bibles, I'm going to be jumping around a lot, forgive me, but the anchor verse for like tonight that's kind of like driving the rest of it is Proverbs 21:5. Proverbs 21:5. And it just says, "The plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty." Okay, so that's Proverbs 21:5, and I'm going to repeat that. Notice the difference. It says, "The plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty." So the dichotomy or the contrast that we're seeing here is there's someone who has plans, and then there's someone who is driven by haste. What's the word haste mean? Does someone just like, make haste, right? Well, yeah, so fast, there's like an urgency to it. You guys know the difference of like when you're just like moving on from the thing, like you just feel like you've been sprinting forever, just constantly moving through life. That's kind of what he's talking about here. It's putting this difference between having active plans and having a life driven by haste. Kind of like being proactive versus being reactive to life. You following me? There's a way that you can be proactive and be ready as things come out, or you're the person who's constantly reacting to whatever new circumstances come in. We all know what it's like to live there, and we get very stressed, right? It's not a very fun place to be, but we get stuck there a lot, right? So can we be honest, is that everyone's living, I feel like on average, especially in student world, I feel like most people are living in this constantly exhausted state of being a slave to the immediate. Right? You ever feel that? Like if you can be honest, like do you feel like you're constantly, at least most of the time, you kind of have like a low-level headache or stress or anxiety at all times, and you're always like, oh, the next thing, oh, the next thing. And you guys, who's ever seen Hot Rod? I just think of that like 42-second long scene where he just falls down a hill continually. Like that's what I feel like my life is a lot of times. So everyone's exhausted, and a lot of times it's because we are a slave to the immediate, to the next thing that's coming, to the urgent. In fact, I like to think of my personal favorite classic childhood show. It has a perfect scene that like perfectly encapsulates what these angst that we're feeling in this is. So I added my own little like Josh creativity to it. But how many of you guys, by the way, even like have watched Drake and Josh? I'm curious. Hold on, all the way through?
Yeah.
For real? Dang. I guess is it on Netflix or something? I guess that's why. Hulu. Okay. Well, it's like to be my age, like you had to watch every episode religiously. And one of my favorite scenes is when they get the job with a sushi conveyor belt, if you know what that is. So I will get this stuff out of the way. And this is just a perfect parable for like what life's like when we're constantly stressed by life. Sorry, you won't have the best seat in the house, but everyone else will. You're very servant-hearted. Oh, great, it's quiet. Why is it quiet? Sorry. She said she'll be back in a minute to evaluate the progress.
Sushi in a box. How easy is this? I know, right? And here we go. Johnny Package, dead fish. Oh yeah, this is really challenging. All right. It might not be the most exciting job in the world, but at least it'll earn us enough money to get Mom and Dad some new furniture. Hey, grab that one, dude, grab that one. Whoa, this thing's going kind of fast. Hey, can you slow it down a little bit? Hey, where are the pieces?
Yes.
Excellent. You boys are doing a fine job. Speed it up a little!
Amen. Let's pray. Well, thank you. I've always wanted to be a movie editor. Yeah, so can anyone relate to that? With the complexity of life. So, guys, that is so often our lives, right? And it just feels like it's a never-ending snowball effect of getting worse and worse and worse. And if you didn't understand what the song was, it was Oceans in the background, which is like the stereotypical song where like, wow, like my life's so hard to play Oceans, and it's like, literally just make your bed, bro. So yeah, just it was many layers of sarcasm in there. So, guys, understand this. So, what unites us in this room, if you're a believer, is that we believe in the gospel of Jesus Christ, which is the story of God's redemptive plan, the Son of God who sacrificed his own life on the cross so that we could have forgiveness of sins because he paid the price for it. God doing that gives us a right relationship with God so that sin doesn't define us. We're no longer his enemy. We're his friend. We're his child. And ultimately that Jesus allows us to be healed from the brokenness of life. Right, that's some of the effects of what the gospel does for believers. But God doesn't merely want to forgive you of failure. He does. He doesn't want to merely forgive you of your apathetic seasons, the time you've wasted the things that the stupid things that you have put a lot of time and investment into. He doesn't merely want to forgive you for your failings. The gospel also shows his heart for God that he wants to actually empower you. He wants to empower you to take ownership of these coming seasons so your whole life doesn't have to be Drake and Josh and the sushi conveyor belt. So God doesn't merely want to forgive you for mistakes. God also wants to empower you to no longer be enslaved to this never-ending cycle of life. And that includes how you spend your time, okay? So the first step of kind of like getting a grip on your time is to trust in Jesus ultimately. Like that's going to actually be the thing that empowers you to do the rest of this. Once you've done that, you've got to determine in yourselves what are your values and what are your priorities. So, by the way, this is going to be like a little bit weird and different. I'm going to give you multiple times to I'm going to shut up and I'm going to ask you either to take notes on your phone or in a journal, and I want you to actually answer some prompts. So, not that you have to verbally answer to me, but I want you to actually answer these things. For you, on your phone or on your journal, I want you to think about this for a minute or two. Write down what you determine are the priorities of your life and what you value most, the things that you value most in life. Take a few minutes and really think about that. Write down your priorities and your values. So what are your values and your priorities? Maybe another thing also that would help you is if you're an adventurous, go get 'em kind of spirit, maybe what are the things that you were striving towards? Kind of what are even goals maybe for you? Maybe that's a more helpful way for some of you to think of that. I'm even going to encourage you guys as I'm talking, I want you to kind of really think on those things straight up. In a lot of this, I actually would encourage you to make me secondary and really think on those things that you're writing down. And I'm going to kind of give you some prompts to continue to think about. But really think, and if you're a believer, you can pray to God to get clarity on some of these things. Because sometimes, when's the last time you've written down what are your priorities? What are your values? What are the pursuits that you have? So I'm going to talk, but I don't see it as disrespectful for you to keep typing, to keep writing, to chew on some of these things. I'm just going to kind of speak over some things to hopefully keep your minds focused on where to go with this stuff. Because man, having goals, having priorities, having values, that's really good. You need those in your life. And if you're a believer in this room, a lot of those things kind of get encapsulated in this one verse, Colossians 1:10, which says, so as to walk in a manner worthy of the Lord. So basically, what kind of Christian life is worthy of the sacrifice Jesus did for us? Live a life that's worthy of it. Which really begs the question of what makes a life worthy of the price that Jesus gave for us? a man living a life worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing to him, bearing fruit in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God. So some of the things he's saying is bearing fruit in every good work, meaning like there's a spiritual benefit that you are building the kingdom of God, not just your kingdom. You are advancing the good news of the gospel, reaching people. You are reflecting the glory of God in everything that you do. That's what he's saying, bearing fruit in every good work. And increasing in the knowledge of God. So that's kind of like a pursuit. Like as you go about life, like sure, that's good to have like plans for college, plans for a career, family. Those things are good, but saying like as you're doing that, there should be this constant journey that you're also prioritizing of increasing the knowledge of God. And that word knowledge doesn't just mean like have head knowledge about God, but it's like as the goal of being married to my wife is to continually know her more. That's what we're talking about here, to continually and relationally know God more as you go about these things. As you look at your values and priorities, like God needs to be like working in and through those things. But you can see through that when he's saying bearing fruit in every good work, meaning you can have good work without necessarily bearing fruit, which I think to me shows that there's a difference between you being busy with life versus actually walking with intentionality. So I think the thing that really is going to like suffocate you in the American dream, in your busyness and all your pursuits, is like you're going to live a life of busyness, not necessarily a life of meaning. Guys, it's very easy for your life to be busy. You're in West Knoxville. Y'all have all the opportunities at your fingertips. You can be really busy but have a meaningless life. And a lot of times, like we're kind of like computers in a way, where like our brains are like, as long as I'm busy like doing functions, I guess I'm like living it up, right? The American dream. But you can busy your schedule to death and not live a life of intentionality. And so kind of going back again, don't listen primarily to me. Like focus on your priorities, your values, your objectives, your pursuits, your goals, and see like, almost ask the question to all those like why, like almost like put on trial every single one of your values and say why. Like, why is that important to me? Because sometimes you may say it's important, but it's like, but why? Like if video games is like one of your greatest priorities in life, like why? Right? Like that's a silly thing to invest yourself into, for example. And I honestly don't know that many of you did that, but sometimes, have you ever like not just said, here are my values, have you ever asked why that's so important to you? Is it something that busies you, that simply makes you feel good? Like is there actually meaning and purpose and fulfilling things like bearing fruit, giving glory to God, knowing Jesus more? Is that even closely connected to that? Or is it just a busy thing that for some reason just consumes a lot of your attention? Fair thing to ask. And the problem is, if you look at your values, your goals, your priorities in life, then it doesn't always fit with how we actually spend our time. Anyone see a value or a priority that you wrote down, but then you're like, if you actually think about it, like how much active time throughout your day-to-day life do you actually spend on that thing? Sometimes you can value something, and then, for instance, I can say I value family, but if I'm not home at all to see my son for 72 hours, I may say I value, but I'm not actually valuing him, right? My time would kind of show it, right? So I think we all have those discrepancies and those tensions in our lives. Believers especially understand this kind of battle between what we say we value most versus sometimes what we actually do. That's why Psalm 90 in verse 12, it says, so teach us. You take a prayer to God. It says, teach us, God, to number our days that we may get a heart of wisdom. Teach us to number our days. So what does that mean to number your days? Well, another thing you probably got was like this little baggie. This is cheesy, but it may be helpful for you. Maybe the stupidest thing in the world, but this may be helpful. I gave each of you guys like a little baggie at your chair. So funny. I thought about like literally printing like obviously fake dollar bills, and then I realized like I think you can get arrested for that. So I'm so glad I thought last minute, Monopoly money instead. But what you have there is you have $24, okay? In each of your bags, you have $24, okay? Think of it this way. If every day you were given $24, but at the end of that day, the $24 were gone, what would you spend it on? Well, I'll ask the question again. If every day you were given $24, but at the end of the day, the $24 was gone, you couldn't save it up, it was gone after the day, what would you spend that on? $24 is not really what I want you to actually think about. I want you to go deeper with that. God hasn't merely just entrusted you with money like $24. He's entrusted you with time. God has entrusted you with time, and each dollar, consider this. I want you to really chew on this and just like get imaginative for a bit. Each of those dollars like would represent an hour of your 24-hour day, right? Each of those dollars would represent 1 hour of your day. So how much money, how many dollars goes to each of those values and priorities and goals that you claim you have? So this could be, you could do this a number of ways. You could very literally just on your journal itself, like here are my values, here are my priorities. Almost as if you get to only 24 hours or $24, how much of that 24-hour, $24 amount is this priority worth in my life? So maybe you just write it down, but maybe you're even just like, you're trying to be frugal, like make every dollar count, and maybe you can even start like writing out your priorities on that white sheet of paper or something if you want, and start getting a little bit more creative and just seeing like, I have a budget, I have $24, like you might say originally, this thing's worth $7 or 7 hours of my time, but then you're like, actually no, and you start pulling back, right? So just like get creative here. You don't have to use the money, that could be the dumbest thing in the world, but seriously, I want you to look and at minimum write down of all your priorities, roughly how many dollars, how many hours of your day is each of those priorities, values, and goals worth? Give you a second to just chew on that. How much are each of those things worth to you? You don't get more than 24 hours, $24. How much are they worth for you? Okay, so whatever you answer with those, you can, in theory, you can write a number, and that can mean whatever to you, but let me also challenge whatever answers you gave. Those number amounts, those dollar amounts, those hour amounts, is that actually true when you look at your time? In the same way I can say I prioritize going on dates with my wife. I'm going to prioritize giving her gifts and stuff like that. But if you look at all of the month of June, if you look at my bank account and you look at all the transactions I've done, if you were able to see my bank account and I say I really prioritize, a priority in my life is to really love and cherish my wife, to give her gifts and go on dates with her, what would you be looking for in my bank account transactions? Be looking that I went on dates with her, that I spent some money on her, that I bought flowers, that I bought gifts. You'd be looking at that and see, is my money actually where my mouth is? Follow me? Okay? So Colossians 4:5 says, walk in wisdom towards outsiders, making the best use of the time. Really want you to focus on that second part, making the best use of the time. So guys, there are good and bad investments. And remember how I said earlier, you are entrusted with time. The unique thing about time is this: everyone has the same amount of time, and yet at the very same time, no one can get more time. Everyone has the same amount of time. Elon Musk has as much time as you, right? You have the same amount of time as every single other human, day to day. In one day, you each have 24 hours. And so the Bible says that there's a way to make the best use of the time, meaning there's a good and bad way to use that time. But the money will go away. The time will go away. So it's almost like you can invest in something that is good and helpful, and then you can invest in something that's bad, but you've got to spend it. You've got to put your money / your time into something. What are you investing your time in? Because otherwise it goes away, right? And that's just wasted time. I want you to grab your phones, if you have a phone. And I don't know if all phones have this, but I know Apple does. So what are you investing in? Here's an example of a bad investment. Go to your settings and go to screen time. Oh yeah, I did go there. Go to settings and go to your screen time. And it'll tell you on average how much time you are spending simply on a screen. Okay? Look at your screen time. Then I want you to do this. I want you to look back at wherever on your journal, on your phone, where you said how many hours, how many dollars, whatever you say, is each of your priorities and goals and values worth in your life? I want you to compare your screen time phone usage to those values that you said you invest however many, you want to invest this much money, this much time into. Do you see a discrepancy at all? Guys, here's the ironic part. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I bet there's not a single person in this room that says a priority of your life is your phone. I bet not a single one of you said TikTok is my priority in life, or one of them. It didn't even make the top 5. I could be wrong, but like for real, I think most people in the room, like, it's not even close to priority. Yet, why is it eating up like 25 to 50% of your like existence? Okay, so there's good and bad investments, and that's why the Bible says there's a way of investing your time well, and there's a way of not investing your time. Guys, understand this. Every single action in your life costs you. Every single yes you make is a cost. So here's a way of saying this. Every single yes you say, every single thing you say yes to, you know what that actually is? Every yes is 1,000 no's. Every yes that you have is 1,000 no's. So, to give you an example, the two of us went to Sinago a little while ago, and so I said, yes, I don't know how long we spent, an hour and a half, something like that there. So we talked, we got to know each other, shared our stories, encouraged each other. When I said yes to hanging out with him, I was saying no to every single other thing that could have taken up that time, right? The same way he did the same. He said, I'm valuing hanging out with Josh enough to put in an hour and a half, and that's to say no. He could have had, tea with the queen. Wait, she's dead, never mind. I don't know, the prince, tea with the prince. I don't even know who's in politics. I shouldn't even go there. He could have decided, I'm going to go to Pigeon Forge and like go down that fake snow mountain and spend my time there, but he didn't say no. You understand? Like, he could have done literally anything with that time, but he chose to hang out with me and vice versa. So we say yes to things. Any guys know what FOMO means? Yes. Fear of what? Missing out. Right? So fear of missing out. And so this thing paralyzes us where sometimes we actually like don't commit to anything because we're scared we're going to miss something important. But by prioritizing that we don't miss something important, we actually miss everyday stuff all the time, right? The days fly by. The fear of missing out actually ends up paralyzing you, and you lose the $24 or the 24 hours whether you spend it on something useful or not. You got good and bad investments. And in every yes that you choose, you're making 1,000 no's. But in also not doing anything and making no decision is also kind of saying no to everything, right? You're not investing. Guys, every action costs you. Every yes costs. And it will cost you time, hear me, that you will never get back. Elon Musk cannot work on June 15th anymore of 2023. He only has the future. Right? He cannot go back to the past. If anyone could, it'd probably be him. But he cannot go back to the past and redeem old time the same way for you. You can't do anything with June 15th. It's done. Every action you do costs you, and you're always paying something. You're always paying. Ephesians 5 gives us mindset like this. In 5:15 he says, look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise. So remember, everything you do in your life, there is a judgment happening of like, is this a wise action or an unwise action? Nothing's just neutral. There's wisdom or a lack of wisdom. It says making the best use of the time. So Paul uses this phrase a lot. Make the best use of the time, which means you can use time foolishly. He says this, making the best use of the time because, and I've quoted this to you guys before multiple times, make the best use of the time because the days are evil. Every hour is costing you because you'll never get it back. The days are evil. So you're paying no matter what. That's a practical way of seeing it. You're paying for that hour that you spent on TikTok. You're paying for the hour that you spent with a friend. You're paying, like, good or bad, you're paying. The days are evil, though, so it's like, if you're not going to get this hour back, if you're not going to get this dollar back, what are you spending it on? That's what he's trying to get at here. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. So now he's saying, not only is there wise and unwise things you can do with your life, but he's saying, so if the fact is that we're going to end up, our days are going to go by, the days are evil, we're always paying in. He's saying, if that's the case, what do we got to do? He says, understand what God's about. Understand God's priorities, God's values, and God's goals. That's what he's saying. If you want to make a good investment in this life, he says, get your mind off of whatever horizontal things and look vertical, look up and say, okay, what does God care about? What are his priorities? What does he value? What are his objectives? That's what he's saying. If you want to be wise and not waste your time and waste your life, he says, understand what the will of the Lord is. And then he makes it very clear. And do not get drunk with wine, for that is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit, addressing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody to the Lord with your heart, giving thanks always and for everything to God and the Father, and in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. So here's what he's saying. He kind of gives this contrast. He's saying, again, I've repeated this, but this has just been a verse, kind of verses that I've been chewing on for a long time now. He says, don't get drunk with wine, and it's not, yes, he's literally talking about don't get drunk, but it's deeper than that. You see what he's saying here? He says, don't be drunk with wine, but instead be filled with the Spirit. And he's basically saying, allow other people to speak biblical truths to you, to sing song, stir yourself up to this, and he made a contrast here. He's saying you can get drunk with wine, and what does it mean to be drunk? It means to be impaired. Right? It means, like, you ever heard of somebody like making, like literally committing a crime while they're drunk and saying, I'm not responsible because I was drunk. So what happens is you are mentally giving over to where you're not actively in rule of your life anymore when you're drunk. But he's trying to push the illustration into time. And he's saying, you get yourself caught up in stupid things that get you off of what God actually cares about, and it's a waste of your time. So I'm not talking about just alcohol here. What are things that we as a society get drunk on? Not rhetorical here. I want you guys to genuinely, I want to hear what you guys think. What are things that basically everyday people are consuming their minds with, their emotions, their time? They are obsessed with things that are kind of worthless. What are things that, yeah? Stupid things rich people. And why do we care? Yeah, why do we care what these wealthy people are doing? Yeah. News, yeah. What else are we wasting time on?
Gilmore Girls.
Not me, but okay. You do you. What else are people consumed with?
Social media.
Social media. What else?
Sports.
Yep, sports. Yep. Yeah. Self-improvement. Yep. Money. What are there like ongoing things at the lunch table that are just like, it's worthless, and yet every single day the lunch table is talking about it? Zelda. Shut up. That's his lunch table because he eats lunch with me. Dang it, now I'm convicted. Cars. Hey, that's oh yeah, literally the movie. I was saying like vehicles. No, she literally just watches Pixar cars every day.
Validation.
Okay, validation. Guys, there are so many things. You see what he's talking about here. He says, don't get drunk with wine, but instead be filled with the Spirit. Now, how do you get drunk? You have to drink alcohol, right, and consume it. Now, you can drink alcohol, and by the way, I'm one of those say, like, I'll enjoy a glass of wine on the side, like, and not get drunk. Like, I'm one of those people, but you have to consume yourselves with stupid things. To consume yourself with the wine is eventually to get yourself drunk. So when you allow something with this much value to have this much focus of your life, you're getting drunk on it, right? You're losing focus of everything else, right? You ever get consumed in a hobby? You ever wasted an entire season of your life on a crush that just totally played you and wasted your time? You ever consume yourself in a sport that literally gave you no satisfaction? Like, we use so many things. And some of you are tinkerers, man. You're builders. Like, you gotta and so you do it. Or maybe you don't know how to talk to people because you have no personality. All you do is gossip. So you just talk about the dumbest thing and you let it go on for months when it was like one thing that happened 5 minutes ago, 5 years ago. You know? So we get drunk on these stupid things, but he's saying instead be filled with the Spirit. Consume yourself, overwhelm yourself, drink up the good news of the gospel, and share that with other people. That's what they're saying there with this kind of thing. So remember, time always costs. And you can either get your mind and your heart obsessed with really dumb things, small things that become big, and not eternal things that seem to last a long time for some reason because we obsess over it, or we can see things with a far more important view. So write out, here's the next thing I want you to do. On your paper, on your phone, I want you to write out your ideal week. This is one of the most helpful things that you can do. Write out your ideal week, and I'm saying like with the fall semester in mind. Does everyone have your schedule for the fall yet? No. Oh, no? Do you generally know what classes you're supposed to have? No. Great, okay, well, sweet. If you do, or just work off of last year and like kind of make that as a draft, here's what I want you to do. Like for real, you got 24 hours, okay? You got 24 hours. What's the average time that you wake up during school?
7.
Okay, 7, fine. 6:30, okay. 6, whatever. So like, figure that out. Like, when's your average wake up time? And then here's some easy things to do. Basically fill up like, when do you have to be at school? AKA, like, I include that as like as soon as you have to like get off of your property at home and like drive or be driven there and get back. It's roughly what, 8 hours in total? 8 to 9 hours. You have a 7 a.m. class. So basically, what's an easy block that already fills up a lot of your time? School, right? Okay, so that's like, if we get simple, this is not nearly as complex. Roughly 8-ish hours of your weekday life is school, okay? By the way, here's a whole nother 8 hours that we haven't talked about. What are the thing that we all do 8 hours a week? Oh, sleep, yeah, because you can't just like be a cyborg and stay up all the time. Guys, let me also tell you, by the way, listen, I'm a terrible, joyless person when I don't sleep. Did you know that God designed you to be unconscious 1/3 of your life? Because you're not God and He is. Like He is teaching you an act of humility there. Hey guys, a lot of your trials and stresses and anxieties in life is because you are utterly abusing your body and you're not actually sleeping. You know, you're designed to sleep an average of 8 to 9 hours. Especially if you were a growing boy or a growing girl, you were designed to sleep. Now, I get it. When I was y'all's age, I slept like 6 hours max. Guess what? I was an idiot and I was irritable. I was frustrated. I was lethargic. My brain wasn't fully there and being efficient with homework. Guys, what if God designed you to be unconscious 1/3 of your life asleep? And what if to not actually be as smart and do that, what if you were actually abusing your body? That's like almost like when you drive a car, you're supposed to put oil in it every however many thousand miles. If you never put new oil in your car, would your car last very long? No. It would eventually explode. Guys, if you do not steward the vehicle that is your body and sleep as God designed you to, guess what? You're not going to think soberly. You're going to have foolish decisions. You're going to be irritable. You're going to be less efficient with school. And you're going to be stressed and unhappy and anxious all the time. Sometimes, like by the way, sometimes an anxiety thing isn't always just about you needing to get a new medication. Sometimes it can be that. Sometimes it's, hey, are you actually sleeping right? And are you actually eating food that ain't crap? The days are evil. You're spending time on something. What are you spending your time eating? Like, what are you eating? How often are you eating? Are you starving? Are you eating junk food? Like, these are wise things, and we have to use the time well. But yeah, 1/3 of your life is sleep. Should be. 1/3 of your life is school. Then what's that leave? About 8 more hours, right? Here's what I want to ask. Again, look at your priorities, look at your goals, look at your values. And then look at those 8 hours and say, in a rough ideal week, how do I want to spend those 8 hours? For real, I want you to do that. I want you to say, if I've got roughly 8 hours to spare, and a part of that's got to be homework. By the way, you make a choice of whether or not you take 57 AP classes or not. I was the wild card who I did this. I could take AP classes, but I decided I know that I could take all these. I'm literally going to take this many instead of this many because that is the season that's a season God wants me in. So every yes is 1,000 no's. So remember, if you're taking 19,000 AP classes, don't be surprised when that's your full-time job. And maybe you're trying to go to Ivy League school and that's like what you need to pursue, and that's great. But you ever just ask the question, why? Does it align with my values, my objectives, my priorities in life, or am I just doing it because the counselor told me to? How do you want to spend your time? Do you want to spend an average of 1 hour on homework or 5 hours or somewhere in between? Like, what's fair for you? How do you want to spend your meals? What other, do you have hobbies? By the way, you're actually like, the fact that like in the Old Testament, they took having a 24-hour rest day so seriously. You know there's a story in the Old Testament, it's called a Sabbath, 24-hour day of rest. Do you know that in the Sabbath, this homeboy knew that he was supposed to have a Sabbath and rest that day instead of work, but instead he started like picking up sticks around his house, and like God told the entire nation to like stone him because he picked up sticks on the Sabbath. It was an extreme example because God wanted to show He takes our rest very seriously. Now, New Testament, theologically, I'm just going to say, Jesus has shown, I believe, that we don't have to have a 24-hour Sabbath. But why was it such a priority for Him in the Old Testament? Because there's a wisdom truth to it. Because on the seventh day, when God even created everything, He rested as an example for us. Guys, do you actually enjoy your hobbies, or is it only a guilt-ridden procrastination from you actually doing what you feel like you're supposed to do? Here's what I'm saying. More discipline equals more freedom. One of my mentors always told me that. More discipline equals more freedom. And here's what I'm saying. What if you discipline rest in your life? What if you create margin in your life to where you actually can rest and not feel guilty about it? Like, guys, for real, other than like maybe summer because you don't have a lot of responsibilities at all, when's the last time like during the school year that like you rested and didn't feel guilty about it? Because God actually wants that for you. Not your entire life. He's not asking you to be a bum, but he wants a principle of rest. And maybe that's 2 hours that you're given on like a couple evenings during the week, or I mean Friday into Saturday, like who's actually working? But how many of you feel guilty on Friday night for having fun with your friends rather than doing homework, right? We kind of feel guilty for things, and that's stupid. Rest. Just say, hey, God delights in my rest, so I'm going to rest here and not feel bad about it, and then starting Saturday evening or Sunday after church, you're going to start working again. Right? So have these rhythms in your life. But how are you spending that time? How are you spending those rough 8 hours? And do your values, do your priorities line up with it? You got to be fluid. Here's another thing to keep in mind. You don't need to spend every single one of those $24 in advance. Like I used to have a schedule where every single minute was planned. I don't advise that. You need to have a little bit of wiggle room, and here's why. In James chapter 4, verse 13, it says, come now, you who say, he's talking about people who are really proud and over-planning. He says this, come now, you who say, today or tomorrow, we're going to go into such and such a town and spend a year or so there and trade and make a profit. Yet, he says it to the person who says that, you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you were a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. So the Bible's not against planning. The Bible's against you being the God of your schedule. In fact, you need to plan. Remember, the very first proverb I gave you said, if you don't plan, you're going to lead to destruction. If you plan, you will end up prospering. You need to be proactive with your life, not reactive. But you've got to be fluid. You've got to have what's called margin. Margin in your life. Margin, think of it like this. If we're talking about the money thing, $24, margin is almost like a savings account. It's almost like a savings account. It's kind of like playing catch up a little bit. So if you schedule out every single hour of your day, have you guys ever had like a meeting that's run long? Have you ever had a homework assignment that took longer than you thought it would? So if you schedule out every minute of your day, but you get a little behind the schedule, well, something's got to give, right? So this is why you need margin. I wonder how many times you and I actually have a God-ordained interruption in our lives that God wants us to minister to somebody, but we've actually either packed out our schedule or been so lazy and procrastinating our schedule where we don't give the time for that interruption. Know this, that you need to plan, but always have the wiggle room and availability for God to pivot your plans. But think about the life of Jesus. When you read the Gospels, think about this. Jesus was interrupted a crap ton. Look at how much of the ministry he had in some of the stories that are written in the Bible that in real time looked like an interruption to his plans. It looked like an interruption, and yet that's where Jesus needed to be. Do you have that kind of leeway in your schedule? What makes it even more weighty, and we're almost going to close down, is that even more weight is we got to have this right perspective. Moreover, 1 Corinthians 4:2 says, moreover, it is required of stewards that they be found faithful. So does anyone know what a steward is? We say that word. What is a steward? It's not a term used today. So you might say that you are a steward of a castle. So if there's a king, the King of England, he could entrust me and say, Josh, you are going to be a steward of this castle that's 500 miles away from his home. He says, the king would say, that's my castle, but you, Josh, are going to be a steward of that castle. So does Josh own the castle? No, but I'm being entrusted to care for the castle. Here's what that means for our lives. You and I are stewards, meaning your life is not your own, and your time is actually not your own. You are a steward. God has invested or entrusted it to you. But here's how all of this starts to make sense. It's not even your time to begin with. So when you go to your values, your priorities, your objectives, are they ultimately yours or are they God's? Because if I was to steward the castle and yet I started to make myself king in this little castle, and then the king would come back, would he appreciate me acting like I own the place? Nope. Do you act like you own your life, or is it God's? And does your time show that? Your $24 a day, it's not yours. Your 24 hours a day. You live like it's God's time or your time. And so then, one more simple thing to just look at as you look over your rough schedule. You got to ask, does every single part of this glorify God. Did you know that it's a command in the Bible to do that? 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, whether you eat or drink, do all to the glory of God. What's that imply? You can do something as simple as eating and drinking not to the glory of God. Meaning, everything about your life either is to the glory of God or is not to the glory of God. Everything. So God doesn't merely just want a time pocket of like, a 30-minute devotion, even 2-hour devotion. He doesn't merely want that time. He wants all 24 hours of every day. So guys, here's a way that you get a little bit more mature. There's more the 201 version. It's not that you need to just prioritize some church time and Bible study time. What about those 8 hours of school? What about in each of those classes, what does it look like for you to glorify God in that class? And I can't answer that for you. For example, it's probably, I'll go the radical route. It's probably not God's will that you never listen to the teacher, you never study, and for an hour and a half class, all you do is share the gospel with your classmates and never listen and fail the class. Probably not God's will. So I'll take it to like the Christianese extreme. But then what does it mean to follow God and to glorify God in that class? Is there a study hall that maybe the best use of that study hall time is to study and to get ahead on homework? Or is that study hall kind of a joke in that you have a relationship with someone in that fellow study hall that you can share the gospel with? Like I cannot be the one to tell you which it is. Lunchtime, right? Does that need to be the time where you socialize and just like kind of recuperate? Or is that time that you need to be missional? Or is that time you need to do homework? Like, I can't tell you. That AP class, is it gonna further where you're gonna try to go to college? Like, just know those filters. If it's gonna help you to that, what's it gonna take? Or sometimes I said no to the AP class and I took CP, which at my school, Powell High School, was like remedial class, and it was like terrifying, but I never had homework. So I had freed up time, and I was a happier person. And so you figure out, like, what does it look like to glorify God in those everyday stuff of life? You got $24 a day. Probably should put 8 to sleep. How much do your friends get? How much does serving and developing yourself get? By the way, don't just work in your life, work on your life. Meaning don't just be busy 24 hours a day, work on your life, not just in it. Develop yourself. How are you growing to be the man or woman God is calling you to be? How are you growing? That's physical fitness. That's growing in your skills, growing in your passions, trying new things. How are you growing yourself? What amount of school between classes and homework? Where's the fun in your life? Do you discipline it? Do you allow it to happen? And then, hey, this stupid phone, what do you actually want it to be at? How much is it actually worth of your 24 hours a day? So the last illustration I guess I'll give to like clarify all that stuff. Anybody ever seen this jar story before? There's like a professor that does this. So the picture is this. I'm going to put these larger toys in here, okay, and say like relatively these are pretty large. So would you say like relatively like the jar is full? And generally, like I couldn't maybe fit like more of those in there, but then so really if you answered no, you're actually correct, because then you start with some of these and say, okay, well technically you can fit these in here. Okay, so now is it full? Well, it's fuller, but okay. And then you start doing this. I don't know how this is going to go. It's supposed to be sand. This is brown sugar. It probably won't go well. Jared's going to hate me. But you get the picture, right? You could keep filling that up, and if this were, if I really like pressed it in there, I could actually, every little crevice could be filled with that. So now is it full? Say yes, just for the sake of principle. But yeah, great job. So let's say this. Your goals, your priorities, and your values in life, consider those like the biggest of the toys. And then there's other responsibilities you have. Maybe you have a job. Maybe you have school. I mean, you should have school. Friendships and things. So the people and your priorities and your values, your objectives, your pursuits in life, those should be the larger of the toys. But then other things that are just like aspects of your life, like this third period class, this expectation, this extracurricular, my sport, my job, those should be the smaller, like the medium-sized balls there. And then the sands, or the brown sugar, technically, that's the everyday stuff that kind of interrupts you and ends up accidentally consuming your time. But the illustration here is if you start with the most important things, everything else will fill up. But have you ever seen the opposite effect? How many of you have lived life and you say your priorities are these certain big things, but your time, like it could literally be 12 hours a day on TikTok. I've seen it. On TikTok alone, let alone every other app. When you fill your life with the small, stupid, worthless things first, you end up packing yourself full. Can any of those larger toys fit in there? No. And so that's a simple way to like try to sum up. Are they just values that you say, or are they actually filling up your time first? Because if they're not, the small, worthless things that you don't really care about, that's what ends up filling up your time. And so God loves you enough to not merely just, hey, make heaven great for you for putting your faith in Jesus. Like, He doesn't just want to save you for heaven in the future. He wants to actually give you meaning and purpose in life now. Romans 8 talks about us being more than conquerors. So are you a slave to your schedule? Are you reactionary? Or do you actually believe God has given me life and meaning and purpose, and I want to know Him, I want to live for eternal things, and I'm not going to let these stupid little things consume my life. I'm going to take action. I'm going to actually say what my priorities and values are in life. They're God's priorities and values, and I'm going to make sure those things make my schedule first.